So, this is a workshop on singing to the Lord, music and divine worship, okay? So we're going to start in a classic way and just kind of introduce one another and greet each other. Make sure that you say good evening.
Oh, cool. Sure.
You can. I'll do it. I don't know why I have this right now.
I support.
First, a little background on what this document is. If you don't know it, then you need a little bit of background to understand what's going to come next. So this is not just written by a Catholic author. It's the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, right? So it's an authority of the Catholic Church, okay? So the hierarchy is structured in this way. First, we all know the Vatican, right? The Pope is the head of all Catholic Church in the world. And below that are the cardinals and bishops, and then they get assigned to dioceses, right? Or what's the plural of that? Dioceses? It's like fish and fish. And then there's a conference of bishops for the United States alone. And then they produce what's going to be the norms at this country. So there's a conference of bishops for each country, to decide what's going on locally. So the Vatican is global, then the bishop is more country and then diocese. Okay, so that's kind of like the hierarchy of things. The head document is called Sacrosanctum Concilium, so that's the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy, and that's headed by Pope Paul VI. December 4th, 1963. So that's when Vatican II happened, okay? So once they gathered in a conference of all the cardinals and the bishops all over the world, they wrote this document called Sacrosanctum Concilium, and that's how Mass is going to be said all over the world. Okay? So that's like the King Constitution. That's like our, Constitution of the United States. That's like the King document, right? So in Sacrosanctum Concilium, there's a part that's dedicated to music in Mass. It's called Musica Sacra, Instruction on Music in the Liturgy, and that was written March 5th, 1967. That's also from Vatican II. It was born in Vatican II. So Sacrosanctum has this section on music, and then Musicum Sacrum kind of expanded on it. Okay, so both of these documents, just keep in mind, it's global, right? This is not yet like in your own diocese or your own parish even. This is global for the entire world. After that, then the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, I'm going to call them USCCB because they're just too long, wrote this document specifically for our country, and of course in English, right? Because as you notice, the first two documents are in Latin. So they published an English guide for us. So it's called Music and Catholic Worship in 1972. Okay, so this was the document that I studied first when I was at the LA Archdiocese. We discuss this a lot. In fact, all of the Congress stuff, the Anti-Convention Center Congress that happens every end of February, early March, it's the biggest Catholic convention there is, right? So they give workshops and stuff like that. Every workshop there is based on music and Catholic worship, right? Of some form or the other. So that's like the foundation of everything on how to pick music, on how to do the music, and what's the role of the choirs, what's the role of the cantors, the priests, everything, right? So that was kind of getting old already, as you might see. It's almost 40 years, right? Over 40 years that there's no revision. So that's why they decided to revise that, the editions, especially with a new translation of the Roman Missal, right? That happened in 2010. And they said, well, I think it's time to rewrite music in Catholic worship because it's kind of dated and we've learned a lot of things since then, too. Now, and that's the document that we're studying today. So everybody understands the placement of it, right? That's very important. And then the other document, or it's not really a document, but it's like a manual that goes along with Sing to the Lord, is the General Instruction of the Roman Missal. So GERM for short. What a funny acronym there. But that, like I said, in 2010, they revised it to the 3rd edition. Okay, so that's why the Lord be with you and also with you. That was the old one, right? Now, and with your spirit, right? The Spanish, the Espanol, never have to worry about that. There's no change at all. It's the English speaking that we have to change to, and with your spirit, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I say Roman Missal, the new germ, the new, right? Even though it's 8 years old. That, along with Sing to the Lord, is like a pair, that inseparable pair, because you have the Roman Missal here that tells you how to do the Mass step by step in great detail, okay? Without that, I think the priest will be lost. What do we do next? You know? And there's so many kinds of liturgies. There's funerals, there's weddings, there's baptisms, there's confirmation, there's a lot of liturgy. So we need the Roman Missal to keep us on track, right? I hope that it's basically actually the Missalette. That's why we call it the Missalette, because it's a smaller version of the Roman Missal. See? So this gives you, step by step, the flow of the Mass as we go on, right? I wish I forgot to bring my Roman Missal, but it's like this big, you know, it's with Viganos. Okay? Anyway, that is the background. Now, why do we sing at Mass? That is the first question. But before we can answer that question and go more into detail, well, we better know why go to Mass first, in the first place, right? And I kind of answered it right there already. It is the source and summit of our faith. That's why we go to Mass. I have a video here of Bishop Barron, and he will give you his summary of what Mass to him would be. Okay? So, here's Bishop Barron. Happens to be Father Paul's favorite, right?
We studied it.
Ah.
As everybody knows, Vatican II described the Mass as the source and summit of the Christian life. And the fathers of Vatican II, following the leaders of the liturgical movement in the first part of the 20th century, wanted famously a more conscious and active participation in the Mass on the part of the laity. They knew the Mass was not simply a theatrical display to be watched, but it was a prayer to be participated in, etc. So we all know those great teachings of Vatican II. But I've become convinced that, in the years after the council, when there's been such a collapse, really, of people's participation in the Mass. In the West, numbers hover between 10 and 25% of Catholics would attend Mass on a regular basis. That even a lot of Catholics don't really know what the Mass is. That even if they are participating in it, they're not quite sure what it is they're participating in. So I've been feeling strongly about this recently, just to articulate for people, what is the Mass? I think for many, especially among the young, the Mass is a kind of religious jamboree. We get together and we sing and we say things and we of a religious nature. But what is it exactly? What's going on? I think a lot of people are very foggy. What I want to do now in this video is say two very simple things about the Mass. Now, mind you, anyone that's tempted to write to me, this is not an exhaustive account of the Mass. I'm not saying this is all the Mass is. I want to do, in fact, perhaps a series of these videos to look at different dimensions, but just two things that provide a sort of frame of reference for the Mass. Here's the first one. The Mass, I think, is the privileged encounter with Jesus Christ. So, as I've said many times before, Christianity is not a philosophy, it's not a social theory, it's not an ideology, right? Christianity is a relationship with the risen Christ. It's a friendship with Him. Everything in Christianity relates to and comes back to that friendship. What's the Mass? The Mass is the most intense way, this side of eternity, that we can commune with Jesus. Think for a second of the two major divisions of the Mass. We talk about the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the Eucharist, right? Well, when you're meeting with somebody or you're having friends over, right, what are the two basic things that you do? Well, we talk, we visit, and then we eat, typically, right? So friends come over, you don't immediately serve dinner. You spend time conversing, talking. What's going on? What's happening? Back and forth. So, think of the first part of the Mass, the liturgy of the Word. Christ communing with His people communing with Him. Christ speaking to His people speaking back to Him. Very important, by the way, I'll say more about it in another video, that the priest, the presider at the Mass, is not operating in his own name, in his own person, but rather in persona Christi. The priest is not in his own psychology. He's meant to speak the words of Christ. Now, this is eminently clear in the readings in the first part of Mass, from the Old Testament, from the epistles, usually the Pauline epistles, from the Gospel. What is that? But Christ, the Word, right, who speaks in all of creation, speaks in a heightened way through Israel, speaks definitively in the Gospels. Christ, the Word, speaks to His people. What do His people do? Just dumbly sit there? No. At the Mass, they respond. Now think of all the responses of the people. Especially I might draw attention to the responsorial psalm. Notice please the responsorial psalm. The Psalms, the great songbook of Israel that contains almost all the feelings and thoughts and reactions of the people of God vis-a-vis the Creator. The Church uses that great songbook to respond to the Word of God. We hear from Isaiah, from Jeremiah, from the book of Genesis, from Exodus, and then using the Psalms, the great prayer book, the song book of the Church, we respond. But see, the whole liturgy of the Word has that quality. I might even say a sort of call and response quality. The head, Christ, calling out to the members of His mystical body. And the members of the mystical body now calling back to Him. Think of the Song of Songs in the Bible, this lovely call and response between the man and the woman, right? That's the first part of the Mass. The mystical body forming itself more intensely. Visiting with each other, Christ and His people. Okay. Second half of the Mass, the liturgy of the Eucharist, you might say, is the moment when we eat together. So Christ is the host of this great banquet. Again, the priest operating not in his own name, but in Christ's name, hosts a banquet at which not just, choice wines and juicy meat is served, but at which the very body and blood of Jesus is offered. And then the communion, again, appropriately called, the communion, when the people of God come and they eat the body and drink the blood of Christ. What more intimate encounter could there be? Having visited, having called and responded, right? Now we commune in the most intense way. Oh, I can commune with the God out in the woods. Well, yeah, in a vague way, sure, because God is the creator of all things. And so sure, in the beauty of the woods and the beach. Great. But it's nothing compared to the communion with the Word incarnate that happens at the Mass in the liturgy of the Word and the Eucharist. Which is why, as I've said, it's a tragedy of the first order that 75 or 80% of Catholics don't come to the source and summit of the Christian life. The Mass is the privileged encounter with the Lord Jesus. Okay, here's the second idea. Again, everybody, there's a lot more I could say about the Mass. These are two simple, frames of reference. The Mass is the supreme instance of play. Now, I'm drawing here on the great liturgical theologian Romano Guardini. Read his still wonderful Spirit of the Liturgy. Play. What's play? Play is something done for its own sake, as opposed to work, which is always done for the sake of a further end, right? So if I go to work, I do so to make money to support my family or to attain other ends, right? The work is subordinate to an end beyond itself. If I work on my car, it's so I can get it in shape to drive someplace I want to go, right? Work is not an end in itself. Work is subordinate to a further end, which means it's less important than play. See, especially in our modern Western consciousness, we get that precisely backwards. We tend to say, oh, play, that's not very serious. No, on the contrary. Play is what you seek for its own sake. So if I play the guitar, I play the piano, I play baseball, I watch golf, I listen to a symphony, I get lost in an engrossing novel, right? Those aren't forms of work, those are forms of play, because they're sought for their own sake. What's the highest form of play? It would be playing in the presence of the Lord, right? If God is the highest possible good, then when I enter into the presence of God, I'm engaging in the sublimest form of play. That's the Mass. To say the Mass is the highest form of play is to say it's the sublimest thing I can possibly do as a human being. I thought of this because just recently I had the privilege of being at the Mass of installation for new members of the Knights and Ladies of the Holy Sepulchre, which is a important order within the church. And if you've ever been to one of these Masses, you know that the Knights and Ladies really, they dress up for the affair. So the men wear these long capes emblazoned with the Jerusalem cross. They wear jaunty berets. The women have black gowns and mantillas and so on and so forth. And at the liturgy, there were a number of bishops and priests, 2 bishops in mass vestments and high mitres, and wielding great swords, came forward and dubbed the new members of the order. Well, as I was watching all this go on, I couldn't help but think of G.K. Chesterton's famous line about the serious play of children, right? What do children do spontaneously when they engage in play? They love to dress up. Right? They dress up as princes or as a queen, or they dress up as a knight or as a lady. The idea is play is often accompanied by this sort of artistic expression. Well, there we were at this Mass of installation. It's a high, sublime form of play, so of course the people were dressed up. So, the Mass. An encounter, yes, of extraordinary, unsurpassed intensity with the Lord. The Mass, the supreme form of play. If we stay away from the Mass, as far too many Catholics do, we are depriving ourselves of these two very sublime realities.
Okay. Was that pretty informative and inspiring, right? He's a great speaker. Okay, and here we go. Why we sing. So, the first is music is a form of expression that transcends language. So that's, I know that's a pretty heavy word, transcends, right? So music does to communicate or to express what plain words cannot do at all. So it's almost like, well, words get in the way, right? Music could express from the very, very sad, depressive human to the opposite end, the very joyous, joyous human, right? And everything else in between there. It has so many, I dare say, infinite kind of expression, really. Much like art. You know, you have a blank canvas, and then you could just paint anything you want in any color combination, you know. So it's an art form that when well done, you could experience God in almost like another dimension, right? Yeah, you see all the space here, you see the altar, you see physical stuff. But music lets you get into more of a spiritual dimension, right? Because it's invisible. And when you just hear it, it triggers a lot of emotion. So what a better way to pray than to offer it up to God in that way, in addition to your words of prayer, right? Okay. And to really emphasize that, to bring it to the secular world, okay, so you're at a birthday party, and it's time to, cut the cake, right? And then the host brings out the cake with the candles, right? And then he goes, okay, everybody, let's say happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. Yay! You see something wrong with that? Right? We don't do that. We go, happy birthday to you. Have you ever just said it? Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, happy birthday. No. Feliz cumpleaños. Feliz cumpleaños. There's something wrong with that, right? Well, and also this, okay, so you're in a baseball game and everybody stands up, but the heart's over here, and oh, say, can you see the dawn's early light? What's so proud, do we say? Do you hear that? Do you even do that? No. Oh, say, can you see? I mean, you can't just say it, right? Do you see what music does to that? And that's just a few examples, okay? Hey. Singing effectively unites us, the liturgical assembly. So sometimes we call ourselves the congregation, right? You've heard of that word before, congregation, right? But technically, we are the liturgical assembly. Congregation is more of just a gathering of people, right? The kind of generic thing. But the Catholic term for it is a liturgical assembly, or the assembly for short. I'm going to call that from now on. Because music is easily accessible, and what I mean by that is this. Sometimes we take this for granted, but when you sing a song, like, try to sing along with me. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. Right? Instant, like this. Now, if I didn't just do it, if I passed the paper, oh, the words are, shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, and then the first note is she. The second note is her. The third note is me. Especially if you don't read music, right? But if I just do it, shepherd me, oh God. Echo. Shepherd me, oh God. Beyond my wants. Beyond my wants. Beyond my fears. Beyond my fears, from death into life, from death into life. I know that's so like, duh. I mean, you're trying to learn a song, okay, go for it. Then. What I'm trying to say is, I don't go to Michelle and say, hey, Michelle, this is the way it goes. Shepherd me, oh God. Oh, and Juan, this is the way it goes. Shepherd me, oh God. Oh, Deacon Ray, this is the way it goes. Shepherd me. Do I have to do that one by one? No. If you could hear me, if I project well, right, and if I have a mic on, everybody could hear me at the same time. And guess what? People could hear you at the same time. And you could hear them at the same time. You see how many things going on at the same time? That's why sound and music is so accessible. You could teach someone, you know, here's another example. Can you copy me clapping? All right. How easy is that? You're already making music, right? Right? So in my classroom over at the school, we're all into drum circles. And what it is percussion instruments in a circle. And you just play, one starts, and then the other one adds, and then the next one adds, and then the next one adds, you know. By the time it goes all the way to the circle, it's this wall of sound, right? You just make music, It's so fun. Because you don't have to say, oh, these are the words to the songs, and this is the way it goes, blah, 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 blah. I mean, okay? That way you can make music immediately, right? That's why it's so fun to do percussion circles. It's so, your self-esteem gets out of the way, you know, just do it. Okay, so music as a medium to easily express our common mission as Christians to love God and God's love for us. And that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish. Now, if you do it through music, if people hear you and you hear people, it goes in this cycle. It's almost like a feedback loop, okay? If you don't know what feedback is, not the kind that you give me feedback, you know, the spoken feedback, but microphone feedback. If the microphone's too sensitive, it'll pick up the sound from the speaker, and it'll go through the speaker again, and it'll pick it up again, and go through the speaker again, and it produces this sound, right? So that's called a feedback loop because it feeds itself again and again. But in this instance, it is a positive attribute. Because when you sing, people hear you. And when people hear you, they're inspired to sing, they sing. Then you hear the Mac and you're even more inspired to sing. So it goes in this loop, you see? If you take the courage to take the first step, that is, right? Because if everybody's thinking, oh, I'll wait till Judy sings, and then everybody else thinks that way, guess what? No one will sing. Because everybody's waiting on everybody. You understand? Right? So it works like that. So in that case, it's a lack of feedback. Okay. Next one. We join the faithful of the past using music to praise God and express our sorrows. Right? So not only do we, when we sing together, not only do we share the current community, but also we touch on the past that went before us, the church forefathers up till now. And I'll touch on one of the styles that we sing at church, and it's uniquely church, is Gregorian chant. When Father goes, the Lord be with you,
and with your spirit,
that's Gregorian chant. Lift up your hearts.
we lift them up to the Lord.
Right? That's all Gregorian chant. Now guess what? 1,000 years ago or hundreds of years ago, sort of something like that, people have chanted the same exact thing. Right? So there is value in learning Gregorian chant, which I will touch again on later. And also, the Catholic Church has a rich treasury of music from the past. Now, sometimes we don't do it anymore liturgically because some of the Mass parts are just too long, right? But we still have a treasure of singable and appropriate and great liturgical music from the past. Now, not a lot of religions could say that. That stretch centuries, right? And also the Exodus, David and the Psalms. About that, the Bible talks about praising God with the cymbals, with lyre, with harp, with songs and stuff. So they use instruments to praise God. They dance. David danced, right? He's a musician himself. And he's the one who composed all the psalms. All the responsorial psalms that you're singing every Sunday, King David wrote that. There's about 150 of them, right? So that is the songbook of the Bible. So it's not just ancient scripture that somebody wrote that inspired them to write it down and stuff. It's meant to be sung. So it's a collection, it's like our books right here. It's a collection of songs, okay, that is designed to be sung. So music, historically, is there from the very beginning, okay? So it's very, very important. So in order to take full advantage of these points, we have to execute full and active participation of the gathered assembly. The mission of the music minister, right? So this is our motto: full and active participation of the gathered assembly. That is our mission, right? And I'll explain that more as we go. Okay, the Mass is not a theater production. It is a liturgy, okay? And I put some graphics that turn out really. So it comes from the Greek, latos and ergos, meaning public and working. Put them together, the work of the people, public service, worship of the gods, right? People and work together, public. The work of the people. So it's not only Father Paul's work or Deacon Rick's work. It's not only the ordained's work. It's not my work. It's everybody's work, right? And it's a little bit kind of confusing to someone who doesn't know anything about Catholic worship, okay? If somebody just comes in from the street and comes through those doors, somebody would think, oh, well, this is an auditorium, isn't it? Especially with the screen down. Oh, it's a movie place. What's that table right there? Is that where we party, you know? Is that where we eat or something? But look at kind of like the architecture, how it's designed. This is the quote-unquote stage, right? The pews are the seats. This is the balcony. I mean, not balcony, orchestra seats. Up there's the balcony seats. VIP sit up here. You know what I mean? And it's even worse in other architectures. In other architectures is the long way, maybe a cruciform with the little wings. Okay, so you have this main assembly all the way back there, and then little side wings. That's even worse, when you're late coming at Mass, and you have no choice but to sit in the back. It's like you're watching, a movie right in the back. Like you're so out of touch. So I'm very proud of this architecture right here because it's pretty modern, right? And you would someone that hasn't visited St. Pius would go, oh, this is a pretty modern church. True, because all the old-fashioned churches are long ways, right? This is more of a inviting kind of architecture because it's a semicircle. It gets you closer to the altar. Even the back pews, it's not really that far. You could still see and everything like that, right? Now, especially in our culture, when we treat performance a little bit differently than we should, okay? So I have to touch on the talking about the regular parishioner, okay? So we go from non-parishioner, has no idea of Catholic worship, to your regular John Doe parishioner, okay? Cradle Catholic, meaning you didn't get baptized and confirmed and First Communion at your adult life, but you got baptized and confirmed probably when you were a baby, right? Comes in, and this is kind of like what my opinions are, what my experiences are growing up as a Catholic, okay? So you come in through the doors, and you sit as far back as you can. You're like 10 minutes late. You sit down, and you just kind of be a zombie for about 45 minutes, and then you walk out. Right after communion, you walk out. You go straight. Okay? That to me is like a blue-collar worker with his time card and going like this and punching in the time card. Ding, ding. Sits down, be a zombie for a minute, gets up, gets the time card. Ding, ding, I've done my work. I'm going to get out of here. Right? You're laughing, right? I see a lot of people like that. Okay? Even though I'm busy over there, I observe the parishioners, okay? And who are ushers over here? Ushers in the morning. Or who has experienced ushering before? Okay, good. Because, sometimes like go back over here to observe, oh, what do you sound like and everything like that. Okay, come on, sit over there. That's cool. I'm kind of trying to listen to the sound system and everything like that. And as I go back further and further and further, oh my gosh, it's the noisiest back here. And guess who's doing it? That's why I asked you. Is it ever actually Even worse, outside here. Oh my gosh, it's so noisy. there is no respect. Because the further back you are, you think, oh, they won't hear me. It's a theater production anyways, it's okay. Let me just talk to my friend a little bit. Oh my, it is shocking. As I go back there, that's pretty interesting. But anyways, because their attitudes are, well, I'm just here to get my blessing, right? I'm in the presence of the priest. I'm within these walls. When I step through, I'll get a blessing. And I fulfill my Sunday obligation. And then you flip off someone in the parking lot. Okay? I hope you are not one of those. I hope. Because you're called to something very, very, very special. It's a ministry, right? And our job is to inspire those John Doe parishioner to be excellent Christians, right? To be involved more, to participate more. And not just go like this when it's time to, glory to God in the glory, glory, glory. Oh, really? Right? That's why, here's an aside. I told the 745 choir, you know, even though in summer we're off, but the real test of your ministry is when you're out there in the pews. Right? It does not stop if you're not over there. You are forever a music minister. You inspire people to sing. Right? You sit in the back so that when you sing, your voice carries to as much people, hits a lot of ears, so that they in turn will sing. Right? So I encourage you to do things. If you're not doing your ministry and you're somewhere else at Mass, sing. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter what time, it doesn't matter. If it's a Mass, it's a Mass. Your music ministry does not end at St. Pius. Yes? And then, yeah, I think okay. Now this is the one that's kind of sore in me. The quality of our participation comes from the desire of our hearts, not our vocal ability. Okay? Remember that. Ben, if you could translate this to the Spanish speaking, that would be so great because this is so important.
La calidad de nuestra participación debe de venir de nuestro corazón, no de nuestra habilidad vocal.
Okay? So thank you. That's so true. And everybody should be thinking about that, especially when you're recruiting new members, right? 99% out of the time when I encourage someone to sing, the response back I get is, oh, you don't want me to hear me sing. I'm terrible. I'm a terrible singer. Right? This is my answer. The spirit of the liturgy is, and this is a direct quote, by the way. This is a direct quote from St. Lord. The quality of our participation comes from the desire of our hearts, not our vocal ability. It does not say full, active, and perfectly protege participation. Operatic and you have a PhD in music. Does it say that? No. Full and active participation no matter what you sound like. And testimony right today, it just happened today. I was over there finishing up my presentation just in the church in the dark, right? And 5:15 Mass is going on here in the chapel. Father Paul's so good. I mean, he likes to sing a lot. So he started to sing. And I heard the assembly from the chapel all the way over there. It was full, right? Was it perfect? No. There was some attitude. Praise the I heard that, and I cringed a little bit, but oh my gosh. That's like 1% of my being, because the other 99% is like, I'm like joyous that everybody in there sang. Now that is the spirit of liturgy, no matter what you sound like, no matter what. Don't be afraid. It's what's in here. It's what's in here that counts when over here, right? Now, that's not to say that, oh, I don't need to rehearse anymore. Dug myself a hole there. But no, I was talking about the assembly out here. Not you guys over there. Right? Because we are called to something higher. I mean, we are called to model the perfect assembly. Right? That's why we put in a lot of hours to do that. Okay, so that's one. What does that translate to? Fear, anxiety, low self-esteem, right? But no wonder, because our culture, the U.S. culture in general, has put music as a competition. American Idol, right? So if you don't do well, Simon is going to put you down. Man, that tears your self-esteem apart, doesn't it? Oh my gosh, a lot of the singers come out crying, and sing their heart out, and then no, can't make it. That's mean. That's just plain cruel. And guess who's watching it? Millions and millions of people, especially teenagers, and they get this into their head. Oh, I better not sing that, so I'm not going to sing at all. I'm not even going to try, because Simon's going to get me. Right? Don't be afraid. Just go for it. I wish singing or playing music, that is more like dancing, and even at that, it's kind of a little bit not good either. But dancing is so accessible. You don't need anything. You just stand up and you go. You know what I mean? A lot more people dance than a lot more people play instruments, because it's so accessible. Right? But what I'm after here is the attitude that we have. You don't need to have a recording contract with Time Warner to be considered as a musician. You are a musician right now. No matter whether you make a lot of mistakes, whether you don't sound good. No, you're a musician right now. Right? The flash mobs. There was this trend going on YouTube, right? Everybody's taking a video of flash mobs. When all of a sudden cello is going like this, and then violins come, and then percussion comes, and then the conductor goes, and then it's all this grand symphony in a random place. Right? Same thing with singing. It shouldn't be only a special thing that you take a video of as, oh, that's nice. Everybody should be doing that, randomly, without fear. Some cultures out there, it's like, I think a scientist went out to study a tribal culture, right, somewhere out in the boonies. And one of them invited him to dance and to sing. And the scientist goes, well, I don't dance and I don't sing, And then she was very confused and bewildered. It's like, you have legs, don't you? And I hear your voice, you have a voice. Right? It is so unusual to them that dancing should be part of what you do, what you are. Singing is supposed to be part of what you are, not a choice. You see? Do you see that wonderful kind of attitude, the perception change, the paradigm shift, right? To get rid of that anxiety and to get rid of all the negative stuff. Especially in music, makes it a competition. It's like it's not a competition. It's a community thing. I wish, back in your neighborhood, if you just take out a drum or you take out a guitar, somebody would join you, say, hey, can I play with you? Hey, can I sing with you? Wouldn't that be great? Instead of, oh, I don't know the chords. Yeah, I'm kind of coughing right now, so I don't want to sing, Right? Anyway. So that goes into the culture of the country, etc. I already touched on that. Now, the Mass also welcomes different kinds of styles, musical styles, all over the world, right? It's very universal that way. After all, Catholic means universal, right? And with careful judgment on what songs to incorporate in the Mass and what to adapt into the Mass, then you would have a community that is engaged in the Mass more because they could relate to the songs, right? A perfect example is the Philap. When they sing Cordero ng Dios, every Filipino will go, whoa, are we in the Philippines? I mean, it takes you back, boom, and then they're inspired to sing that way, especially if there's the Filipino first time coming over here, right? The Hispanic culture, I mean, when they hear da, 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 I mean, it's very joyous. Although you gotta take care not to go, hee 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 hee, arriba! Right? Is that right? That's not really liturgical. Yes. Control yourself, right? But it's that excitement. The excitement, is what we're going for, right? Although the Mass is also countercultural at the same time. Okay? So all of those things that I said, it also goes against that. And what I mean by that is, the Mass has its own spirit, shall we say. It takes elements from the culture, wherever it is, what country it is, and what kind of people that is mixed in, takes the best out of that and makes it her own. Right? We can't just take any secular song out there, just as long as it has Jesus in it, and then put it in the liturgy. Right? It doesn't work that way. You gotta listen to it, you gotta look at it, etc. It's a long process, but it also teaches, it invites people to the table of the Lord, but at the same time, it teaches you. Okay? So the Mass is like that. You bring in, and it's the work of the people, right? Don't forget that, liturgy, the work of the people, but you also take from it. So you give, and then the Mass gives to you. And it goes like that, week after week, like this. Okay? So don't forget that. So if you don't participate, you don't give. Will the Mass give something back? No, sorry. Does that make sense? If you don't give, nothing will be given to you. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. So we are very careful of accepting whatever's trend, the ones trending right now. It's a very funny example, but I observed a Mass before that the priest goes, through him, with him, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, all glory and honor is yours, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. does not apply anymore, right? It needs to be relevant to our time now. Maybe it was kind of good back then, especially when Vatican II just came out and, you know, it's in its infancy and musicians really don't know what to do. It's like, oh, wow, we can play guitars now? I thought it was just a pipe organ. I'll get to the pipe organ later. Oh, play guitars? Okay. Man, one chord. You don't even need to change chords. E, come on. So, do you see the contrast there? Right? No offense to people who like that. So it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act. You take from the culture, and the Mass teaches you something. Okay. Now this one: participation through active listening, not passive hearing. Okay. And what I mean by that is this: we also participate through listening, even if you are not doing anything or like an active singing. You can still participate by focused or active listening. So what happens in the Mass too, especially at the Eucharistic prayer? Oh good, Father Paul's here. When the priest does the Eucharistic prayer, he does it in behalf of the whole assembly, right? He's not just saying those words to turn this bread and wine to the body and blood. It's not this magic hocus pocus kind of thing that he needs to say in order for the bread to turn into the body of Christ, right? He is offering that great prayer up to God in behalf of us. So it's like, if you see like a little life force sitting right here, and then he takes it up, boom, like that. Do you see that visual? Right? It takes it up. So what do you have to do? You have to intently listen. Listen to what he's saying. This is the Eucharistic prayer is the central and the most important part of the Mass, right? So it's not just the priest, but all of us. He's doing that for all of us. It's the same when we are hearing just the choir. You know, the assembly's job is to take what they hear from the choir and take that and offer it up to God. Do you see that kind of mentality, right? You just don't sit there and, oh, that's nice. You know, the harmonies are great over here. And I like the melody, you know. No, the assembly's job is take it in, absorb it in. And that is your prayer up to God, right? I mean, and it doesn't need to be with voices either. You could take something like, this. Let me see. It could be instrumental, totally instrumental. You know, the Father Paul likes to use a lot of incense with his tinkling. I call it the tinkling parable. Clink, 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 whatever, right? That smoke takes our prayers up to God. That's the idea. The smoke rises up as prayer to God, right? It's the same thing when you hear something, when you're not when you're not singing the song itself and just hearing the choir or something instrumental. That's what you're doing. You're offering your prayers up to God. But you gotta actively think that. You can't just sit there and say, oh, that's nice. You gotta be concentrating on that. That is, and that's hard to do, especially with this culture. So, and this is a direct quote also from Pope John Paul II in here too. And he says, in a culture which neither favors nor fosters meditative quiet, whoa, the art of interior listening is learned only with difficulty. That is sad. When I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, did he actually just say that? But it's a quote, and it's in the document itself. But he's making a point there, right? In a culture that is just hustle, bustle, bustle, da, 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 da. No one ever, like in the olden days, I've done this before, sit down in your living room, quiet, dead quiet, and just listen to your 33 long playing phonograph, favorite record, from start to finish. So you're sitting there doing nothing for like 45 minutes, listening to the songs in sequence, without interruption. What is the culture now? Headphones, and you're washing the dishes. Or you're talking and you're watching TV at the same time.